So, in a couple of my recent videos, I said that I could make an entire laundry list of things from the PTE that I want to see come to life. Well, I actually do have a list of those things, and I'm going to be going over them in this video. Now, I don't expect everything on this list to make it in the update that's supposed to come out. It's supposed to come out later this month. In fact, I'd be kind of surprised if half the changes or half the things in this list are in the update. And none of these changes or these things in this list really hinge on one another. These are all things you can all think of them as standalone things rather than this would work well, or this is something I want to see because of this, or this is something I want to see only if this gets added, if that makes sense. So, like I said, I have a list. It's a 15-point list with a number of sub-points, but I do in fact have a list. The first thing on the list is the shortened aim time for tanks and assault guns. And this is pretty straightforward. It's just reducing the aim time of the tank down from 3 to 4 seconds to, I believe the PTE value was 2 to 3. So again, it's a pretty straightforward change. And yes, I'm using the term assault guns here. I define an assault gun as something that has a big gun, but either does not have the armor, or it does not have a big enough gun to actually do the same job as a tank. So, assault guns, as I'm defining here, are the Striker MGS, the Sprut, the BMOP with the Rapara, the M8 AGS, the Booker, the PT-76, the Sheridan, and the M68-1. Now, you could technically define the M728 CEV as an assault gun as well, but seeing as that is a combat engineering vehicle, in fact that's literally what CEV stands for, I'm kind of hesitant to consider it an assault gun and more just willing to shove into its own special corner. And I don't know if non-tank vehicles had a different aim time in the PTE. I don't think they did, but I never really checked. But the reason why I bring this up is because I think the 2 to 3 second aim time would work well for all of them, so long as they all have the associated, so long as they have a big gun, is what I'm trying to get at. I mean, the M8 has a 3 to 4 second. The aim time does not change whether or not you have the 120 or not. Where is the PT-76? Because the PT-76 is the only vehicle that I know of that can take either a big gun or a smaller autocannon. So 3 to 4, that goes to 2 to 3, that goes to 2 to 3 as well. Okay. So I think you should just bring it, or I would like to see the aim times brought down to 2 to 3 across the board for everything. Actually, no. What am I saying? The other assault gun that could take a sod and engraving autocannon has arguably been the most overpowered vehicle in the game for pretty much since release. Yes, I somehow forgot about the M10 Booker. Don't ask, I don't know either. And, so, yeah. Tanks and assault guns, I'd like to see the aim time reduced to 2 to 3 seconds. The next thing I'd like to see is the ignore cover values for tank HE and heat. I'd like to see that come back. Now, there's two notes here. Firstly, this does not just affect tanks. This also affects the 100mm guns on the BMP-3, both variants, the one in mech and the one in coastal, and the 100 millimeter gun on the BMP3, both the one in mech and the one in coastal, the BMD4M, and the Bochka U turret on the BTR-90, which is basically just a BMD4M's turret on the BTR-90. So it affects that. I don't think it affected the I don't think it affected the AC-130. The 105 and the AC-130. That doesn't have any cover negation. Okay. It's just described as 105mm HE. I'm pretty sure... Where is it? Here it is. The M391A1, which is HESH. So if I go to something like the M60, M393A1, 393, that wasn't M393, M391. Okay. Alright. Vehicles, M8, M393, MGS, M393, Booker, M3. Okay, so I'm assuming that's a typo, because there's all used the M393. So. Anyway, I assume that's a typo. And so, firstly, like I said, it includes 100mm guns on some Russian IFVs, which I think would be a nice little buff to them. And secondly, one thing I want to emphasize is that both HE and heat would get cover negation values. This doesn't just include US HE and heat, this also includes Russian HE and heat as well. Because Russian tanks, compared to their US counterparts, generally have weaker armor, they're generally cheaper, they generally have less effective guns, or they have weaker armor, they have less effective guns, but they're generally cheaper, they have better side armor, they have an access to a much more flexible... a much more flexible variety of ammunition, and usually you can field more of the cheaper ones. So this makes me believe that Russian tanks are better suited towards more assault work, where you'd expect to be engaging the the enemy at closer distances than something like an Abrams. Honestly, what an Abrams wants is to sit at maximum range using its good frontal armor and its good sabot round to basically bully anything in front of it. What Russian tanks want is different than that. So the next thing that I wanted to, I want to see cover negation on the tank rounds, including the HE and heat for Russian tanks, because I think that would be a nice little buff to them as well. And yeah, okay, and that's nothing I want to see. The third thing I want to see is I want to see a speed increase for all the long-range air-to-air missiles. So this includes the AIM-260, the R-37, or the R-37M, and the AIM-174. And the reason why I want a speed increase is just pretty straightforward. It makes the missiles easier to use, and it makes them safer for the plane to use, because with the way terminal guidance works, the plane basically needs to keep its nose pointed at the target until the missile's own guidance system can actually kick on. And the slower your missile is, the longer it's going to take the missile to go from the plane to the target, and the longer your plane needs to be pointed at the target, and thus flying towards the target. And the target is likely on the enemy's side of the line of contact, where all their air defenses are. So the less time the plane is flying in that direction, the less likely it is to get shot at, either by a hostile aircraft or hostile ground-based air defenses. This is the same logic behind why they reduced the aim time for missiles to 0 seconds, so planes don't have to do that. So planes don't have to fly basically towards the enemy and towards air defenses and whatnot. So I think that would be a nice change, and honestly, it would just be a nice quality of life change in general. The ability for the missiles to get faster. Now these next three are, well, wait, no, hang on, I skipped one. The fourth one that I'd like to see is to reduce the cost of air-to-air weaponry on planes, like the PTE. I want my 400-point Raptor, please. And secondly, and more importantly, it's actually no, I didn't skip one. Number 4, 5, and 6, like number 3, are all just going to be general quality of life improvements, I think. It would just be a big quality of life improvement. Number 4 is reducing the cost of air-to-air weapons, like I was just talking about. If memory serves, an FA-18C kitted out as it is now on the PTE was about 330 points, I believe. Whereas here it is 370. For reference, if I'm running something like Marine Armored, this is 37% of my air tab. Previously, it was only 33% of my air tab. So it makes things more flexible. I don't think it's going to affect things too much, depending on how you're running. If you're running something like Marine Armored, I don't think it's going to affect your point count too much, or Marine Baltic for that matter, because you have such a small amount of aircraft points anyway. But I don't think it's going to affect decks like that the most. I think what you're likely to see are decks with a larger point allotment in the air tab, things like Marine Airborne, for example, or alternatively Striker Airborne, or anything with SOCOM as well is going to see, or at least Marine SOCOM and Striker SOCOM are also going to see benefits because of their larger air tabs. And it's not just the air tab you have to think about, it's also the 10% rule, where you can go 10% over the point allotment within the air tab. Or not, it's not air tab specific. You can go 10% over the point allotment within the tab as a whole. That's one quality of life improvement that I'd like to see, just making things. It would only really affect air superiority fighters, which is something that the developers want to emphasize anyway. But it would make them a lot more comfortable to use, and it would make them a lot more comfortable to actually fit in your deck. or at the very least, it would just free up some points that you can use for other things. Like, for example, okay, at 330 points, if this loadout goes down to 330 points, the alternative that I would normally kit it out with would be something like this, so that I have more loader time. This is 320 points, but if this goes down to 330, it would be easier for me to fit this in my deck because it's not going to cost much more than just fitting it with a couple of fuel tanks. And for that matter, if I wanted to go AMRAM, that's 325. That's 375. So it wouldn't be that much more expensive, is the point I'm trying to get at. And it would also be more appealing. The next thing is the reduced cost for some infantry units. Now, I think this largely affected things like recon infantry. I honestly can't remember. But I think this largely affected things like recon infantry and some of the line infantry as well. But it would largely just allow you to fit more stuff in your deck, especially if you want to bring transports along with your infantry. One problem I have with pretty much any deck is that if you want to bring transports along, that's automatically going to eat into your infantry tab. And part of me kind of thinks that infantry and transports were balanced with this in mind. In fact, I think that that's a safe argument to make. But if you just slightly reduce the price for a lot of various infantry units, it would be one of those quality of life changes that I was talking about. This one, however, is probably the least. It has the least priority of any of the changes that I'm going to mention. You can see how beefed up the landing gear is for carrier operations. The sixth thing on the list is to reduce the cost for most utility and cargo helicopters. And again, this is one of those quality of life changes. Just basically cut the costs down and make it not necessarily easier, but more comfortable to fit into your deck. Because, I mean, I don't know, for everything it offers, a 300 or a 150 point a 150 point CH-53 seems a little steep. I think that was only 130 points in the PTE, and that's not that big of a reduction. So I don't know. I just think it would be another good or another comfortable quality of life improvement. On the subject of on the subject of helicopters, they mentioned that one of the reasons why they did not want to or they mentioned one of the reasons against reducing the price on helicopters was to prevent things like helicopter rushes. I'm not entirely sure I follow along, because at least to me, it seems like that's a problem that, well, I'm not sure it's actually it's going to be that much of a problem. Now, I do not have access to all of the statistical data that they gather during the PTE, so I honestly don't know. I'm just a little bit confused on how much of a problem it's actually genuinely going to be. Personally, I think that you could solve the problem somewhat by increasing their death timers, so that if someone does rush with the helicopters, they're going to get punished for it, because it's going to take a lot longer for the helicopters to actually come back. But anyway, that's just me. That's just my line of thinking. The seventh change is increased rocket accuracy. Now, I don't know if this involved just the rockets on helicopters or rockets on fixed-wing aircraft as well. But I'd kind of like to see the rocket accuracy increased. However, this is it's a low priority change. And I don't think it's going to affect the game too much. Well, it's going to be... It's going to make helicopter rockets more powerful, yes, but as a balance issue, I don't think it's really going to be... It could make helicopters in general a bit more powerful, but it's not going to balance it's not going to make one nation overpowered compared to the other, because you're affecting both US and Russian rockets. That's what I'm trying to get at. The extra accuracy would... It probably wouldn't... I don't think it would qualify as a quality of life improvement, but it would be one of those little things that I'd like to see. Although, this is what I refer to as a low priority change, because it's probably not going to happen, and it's not really going to have that big of an effect if it does. The next thing on the list is the different loadouts for various infantry units. And first is the first one that we're going to cover. I mean, it's the second on the list, but everything else is Russian, so I'm just gonna cover this first. Is the mech rifleman with the Dragon. Now, when this loadout option was given to mech riflemen, they had a 7-man squad on the PTE instead of a 6-man. So the squad size is slightly different. But what it appears that they did was they just removed one of the M240s, replaced it with an M4, and then removed the AT4s entirely and replaced them with the Dragon with 3 missiles. The stats for which can basically be seen right here: 5 M4A1s, 2 M240s, 1 Dragon. Now, it's worth noting that when they increased the size of the squad, which I believe was up here somewhere, they added an additional M240, so you went up to having 3 M240s. So what I think they would do, or something that they could do, is drop it down to 1 M240 and then give the other guy the Dragon, also with 3 missiles. You might also see the price go up from maybe to 55 points. I think 55 points would probably be good. 60 might be a little bit too much, but I would settle for something like 55 points. Actually, that is a point. How much did the okay, so that went from 55 to 65. And then that's 70. So that's basically an extra 5-point increase. Alright. So do the same thing here and just make it a 5-point increase. The next thing that I wanted to cover was the, the Descent Key 90 loadout. This is basically Descent Key, but they lose the PK. They lose the PKP. Where's the Descent Key 90 loadout? Here it is. They lose the PKP. They gain an RPK 74, and they get the RPG 29, which is right here. And it's basically just an extended ranged reloadable version of the RPG 27 that you have in Coastal. Yes, it is an extended range. And I like this because it gives the it would give Descent Key a little bit extra anti-armor punch at the expense of their anti-infantry, at the expense of their anti-infantry capability. So basically, well, I mean that's pretty much what it is. You get an RPG 27 for better anti-armor, which has slightly more damage, more pen, and a 50% range increase over the RPG 7V. You do, however, lose out on the PKPs, as I said. Now, one thing about the Descent Key 90 loadout is that they were supposed to get AK-74Ms. I'm honestly not sure why, because I think stat-wise, the AK-74 RMO and the AK-74M are pretty much the same. Well, no, the AK-74 RMO is slightly better. It has slightly better DPS. But I would just let them keep the AK-74 RMO. I don't really think you would need to increase the price for that customization option either. I think you would. I think the price for the unit should stay at 80. The next thing on the list is the PKP for VDV Dish. And this is pretty straightforward. You lose one of the RPG 7Vs, you lose the RPK, and you lose one of the AK-74s, but you get 2 PKPs. So this, basically. You just get 2 of these. That's the wrong one. There it is. One thing that I did notice is that there was in the Sturm version here, you do not have the RPK, and the RPG-7V2 has an option between a tandem RPG-7 and anti-armor rocket and the thermobaric rocket. However, in game, they've decided to give you the extra RPK at the expense of one of the AK-74s and one of the grenade launchers, and just stick with the thermobarics. Honestly, I kind of like this configuration better because that fits them more into, or that gives them a more defined role as assault infantry. Well, I mean, this is listed as assault. It's listed as thermobaric, but you get my point. The next thing was the Motopodorovka AGS upgrade for the PTO melts. And again, this is just one of those things that I'd like to see. What did it do here? Actually, I should point. Where is it? Oh, it's back. It's back here, if memory serves, because it was with the mech rifle and the dragon. Here we go. Was it? No, it was not. I'm dumb. Here we go. Here we go. So, 3 AK-74Ms, a PKP, and a grenade launcher. Okay. So you lose on the AK-74Ms, you keep the PKP. So basically, what happens is you trade out one of the AK-74Ms and the 2 Melts launchers for an automatic grenade launcher. And I think that could be nice to add a little bit of flexibility. The Melts are, well, let's be honest here, the Melts are kind of garbage. The only thing that I can think of that is comparable to the Melts would be the Spike SR. And if I'm going to be entirely honest, the Spike SR has better pen, the same damage, the same range, the same speed, the same supply weight, reload time, except the Spike SR is fire and forget. And again, with better pen. And if I'm not mistaken, fire and forget missiles are not affected by unit stress. So once that missile leaves the launcher, if the target doesn't pop smoke, or if the target doesn't have APS, the missile's gonna hit it. So it's not a case of just pointing an autocannon at the offending ATGM team and getting them to panic and keep their heads down long enough for the missile to miss. So, anyway, the Melts is a bit meh, is what I'm trying to get at. So replace that with a grenade launcher could, depending on exactly what you want to do, it could be pretty useful. I know that you already have a grenade launcher team, yes, but you also have an ATGM team that is, let's be honest, using a much better ATGM. Also, I wish they would give these... I honestly wish they would give these guys the AK-74s. Really, these guys look a lot like SSO, and they're probably supposed to be a variant of SSO, but I wish they would make them into more like line infantry. So 6 armor and AK-74Ms with maybe a 5-point price reduction. Anyway, so those are the unit variations that I'd like to see. Up next is, okay, this is another one of those low priority changes, and if there's anything on this list that I would be most surprised to see in the next update, it's going to be this. And that is the 500 meter range increase for artillery. Now, personally, I kind of want to see it because I think it's nice, but at the same time, I highly, highly doubt this is going to make it into the game, because if it did, it would probably require an artillery rework, or at the very least a price increase across the board. It would mess with the balance for artillery systems, probably. In fact, if it does make it into the game, I wouldn't be surprised if it's tube artillery only, so that it doesn't affect rocket artillery systems. And again, that's if it makes it into the game, and I'd be kind of surprised if it did. So anyway, next thing that I want to see, and this is something that I think is going to make it into the game, but the next thing I want to see is just, well, it's this, but limited. I want to see the, I want to see the resupplyability just limited. I like the idea of the resupplyability, but I don't think having it be. But I don't think making it infinite is good for the game. Are those ERA tiles clipping through the side? I can't tell. So that's what I want to see. I want to see this just limited. And honestly, though, that's probably going to make it into the update. If there's one thing that, like, okay, if there's one change that I would be the most surprised to see in the update coming later this month, it's going to be the 500 meter range increase on artillery. If there's one change that I'd be the most surprised not to see in the upcoming update, it's going to be this. Next is seating adjustments for troop transports. And mostly what this is it's a 14-seat M113. So this goes for both the M113 in Armored Brigade and the M113 in Baltic. And a 14-seat MTLB. The other thing I wanted to suggest was I wanted to list here was the 22-seat AAVP, because I think that can be useful. And there's a couple reasons why I think it can be useful. I think it can be useful because it allows you to bring either it allows you to bring a 13-man squad of Marines or a 9-man squad of whatever else, troopers, airborne, rangers, whatnot. But it also would allow you to bring 2 8-man squads, so maybe things like CAT teams, and a 6-man squad. So, for example, Force Recon, or alternatively, if you're running a Marine Corps Baltic spec combo, this would allow you to shove in 2 of these guys. I'm sorry, I don't know how to pronounce that. And 1 SC Scouts. That is 14 Spike SR launchers. That might be a little bit funny. Well, actually, no. That would be funny. That might be a little bit dumb. Actually, I want to see something. No, it's these ones with the mini-me's. No, that does not have a minimum range. Okay. Anyway. However, this, again, is one of those low priority changes. I want to see it, but I don't really think it's going to make it in there. Well, honestly, low priority really isn't a good word, because when I'm saying low priority in this video, what I mean is it's something that I want to see, but I don't think it's actually going to be in there. So I can't think of a better term for that. I suppose unlikely. Well, actually, no. Yeah, unlikely would be a lot better. This is one of those unlikely changes from the PTE. Next is seating for recon vehicles. Now, when it comes to seating for recon vehicles, there we go. When it comes to seating for recon vehicles, honestly, I don't really want to see... I don't want to see simple 2-man seating. I think 2-man seating is a bit too restrictive, because there's only 2... there's only 2 recon units, well, technically 3, if you count the Estonian... If you count the Estonian sniper team, that have actually 2 men in it. And I'd like to point out the Estonian sniper team is technically a customization option, that you can swap out either for a 3-man sniper team or a 4-man combat divers team. So there's only 2 units in the game that will stay at 2 guys. So having 2-man seating might be a little bit redundant. Or not redundant. It would be a little bit useless, for lack of a better term. Because when are you actually going to be able to, like, when are you going to use it? And I know that you can make an argument, well, if the recon squad gets banged up, then it could dwindle down to only 2 guys and be useful then. Well, yeah, but to be entirely honest, the number of recon units I'd actually want to use in a firefight, it's not very large. And even then, it's only under relatively specific circumstances. Like, if you want to use RRC, or some other type of fighting recon like that in a forest, then yeah, I understand it. Otherwise, I don't know. Otherwise, I would just stick with, otherwise, I think I would just stick with a minimum of 3-man seating. And I think the seating in the vehicles that they list here is fine enough. So just take all these 2-man vehicles with 2-man seating and bump it up to 3-man. You can make an argument for 5-man seating in some vehicles, because I'd like to point out that all three of the different Resvedka units, VDV Resvedka, Naval Infantry Resvedka, and then the basic Resvedka, all have 5 men. However, if I'm going to be honest, I think that might be a little bit too much. Mainly because, if it's 5-man seating, that can allow for interesting shenanigans with most of the infantry units from the VDV spec as a whole, which might not be good. And B, if you look at these seating values, a lot of it is geared towards sniper teams. Okay, yes, some of the 4-man seating can be used as to transport around things like Green Berets, the grenade launcher or Igla team in guards, or not guards. Well, yeah, there's a grenade launcher and a Verba team in guards. The grenade launcher or Igla team in Moto. The Conkers or the SPG-9 team in Coastal. Things like that. Or, for that matter, a number of the units in Airborne. The M2 team, the Mark 19 team, or the TOW team. So, I don't know. I guess you can make an argument for up to 5 seats, but as things currently stand, I would just like to see it sit at like 3 to 4. And I mean, heck, you could even take a Cornet M team. That's only 4 seats, so it's not like being able to take a TOW team in a recon vehicle would be overpowered or anything, because okay, sure, you can take a TOW team in an Humvee LRAS. You can also take but you can also take a Cornet team in a 1v14. So, but anyway, I digress. The next thing on this list is just like small unit improvements. So, for example, where's SOCOM? There's SOCOM. So, for example, in SOCOM, the MOPS on the B2 only cost 400 points instead of 500 points. And I would honestly like to see that, because the MOPS are a little bit underwhelming. Like, yes, it is a sodding great big bomb, but because it's a bunker buster, its damage and blast radius has been bottlenecked compared to something like the FAB 9000s on the TE 160, which has a much bigger blast radius and much more damage. In fact, where's the FAB 3000 for that matter? No, wrong one. I need TU 142, 110, 220. It's barely much. I mean, the MOP is technically better than the FAB 3000, but the FAB 3000 weighs 3 metric tons, as the name implies, which means it has about 1.5 metric tons of high explosive in it, which is about 3,350 pounds, give or take. The MOP, if I'm not mistaken, has more than 5,000 pounds of explosives in it. For reference, the FAB 9000 weighs 9 metric tons, and the weight of a bomb, about half of a bomb's total weight is explosives. Now, this is for a conventional bomb. If you're talking about a bunker buster like the GBU 57, things get a little bit weird because you're going to. So a bomb's weight is generally made up of the explosives and the casing, as well as things like fin configuration and fusing options. Usually, for a general purpose bomb, the explosive is going to make up about half the bomb's weight. For a bunker buster, or any type of bomb that's designed to penetrate the ground, you have a lot more weight in the casing because you want the bomb to be heavier. It's kind of like how during the lead up to World War II, the 16 inch by 50 caliber Mark 8 super heavy AP shell weighed 2,700 pounds because the casing was heavier. It was denser. So it weighed more than the 2,240 pound Mark 5 AP shell. Now, to go back to our math, the FAB 3000 weighs 3 metric tons. If half the bomb's weight is explosive filler, then that is a roughly 1.5 metric tons of explosive filler, which is about 3,350 pounds. The GBU 57, if I'm not mistaken, has approximately 5,000 pounds or more. I mean, I've seen the figure. I've seen it described as more than 5,000 pounds of explosives inside it. And the FAB 9000 weighs 9 metric tons. So it has 4.5 metric tons of high explosive in it. Now, 4.5 metric tons is about 9,000 pounds. So I don't expect the GBU 57 to be an equal to the FAB 9000, but I expect it to have a larger blast radius and more damage than the FAB 3000. If I had to speculate on figures, I would personally up the blast radius to 300 meters and the damage up to 150. I mean, granted, the damage is kind of pedantic, especially considering that we are technically talking about a laser-guided weapon. So, if you actually drop the bomb on something, you're gonna kill it, because extra damage plus target vaporized is still target vaporized. So I wouldn't even mind seeing the damage go up, but I would like to see the blast radius increased. The problem is that, like I said, they bottleneck the bomb's performance because it is designed to penetrate the ground. Now, a couple days ago, I was actually talking to another fella on the Discord, and he raised an interesting suggestion that maybe the GBU 57 has a massive suppression radius, because as he put it, a massive subterranean explosion is going to knock everybody nearby on their butts, or something like that. I can't remember exactly how he put it, but he basically put it like that, and it's a pretty good point. Like, if okay, sure, the bomb might penetrate 100 plus feet underground, it's still 5,000 pounds of explosives going off. So the localized seismic effect is going to knock you on your rear. Anyway, so small side tangent over. The next thing on the list is, what is it? Ah, yes, it's the 5th RPG 28 for the guards, the guards Mosostrelki. Now, another thing that I would bring up for these guys is the initial price reduction from the PTE down to 70 points, because, and this is a long-held belief of mine, these guys need something. I mean, they need something, honestly, because what you have is, you have guards infantry. I mean, they're supposed to be good. Like, a guards tank unit is supposed to be a, well, I hesitate to use the word elite, because people generally, they generally associate the term elite with special forces, but they're kind of, they're supposed, this guy's shadow's not working, I just noticed. Like, you could see the top of it right here, but most of it's just gone. Anyway. Okay. Well, that's an interesting little bug. Anyway. The point I'm trying to get at is, I think these guys need something, because a guards unit is supposed to be like, a guards unit is supposed to be a high quality unit, so you'd expect them to have high quality equipment. Now, personally, I kind of want to see their armor upped to 8 rather than just a regular price increase, or not price increase, a regular price decrease. But if a price decrease is on the table because it was in the PTE, that's what I'd be willing to take. And like I said, a 5th RPG 28 wouldn't hurt. Next is the KAC AMG for Rangers. Now, this is something interesting, because according to the post on the Discord, when they announced it, they didn't give us a number. They just said that the M249 Para was being replaced with the KAC AMG. So, does that mean that you are replacing both of the M249s with the KAC AMG? Or are you replacing only one? Don't know. Also, well, actually, you know what? Hang on. I don't know, but I do know a way to find out. I'll be right back. Okay, so pulling this up from the video, the last video I made about the PTE updates, they apparently replaced them on a 1-for-1 with the KAC. So 2 M249 Paras got replaced by 2 KACs. However, this, in hindsight, brings up another issue, for lack of a better term. Because the KAC, as can be seen here, has a 700 meter range. Now, it only had 600 meters on the PTE, but here it has a 700 meter range. So, and the longest range thing that the Rangers have is the Scar, which only shoots out to 500 meters. So, I guess if you did give the Rangers a KAC, you'd only give them one. Or an alternative would be to add a third customization option for them. So you have like close quarters, and then you have balanced, and then you have standoff, where you give them like 2 600-meter DMRs, or even 2 700-meter DMRs, like the MRGGS, and then 2 KACs that also shoot out to 700 meters. But in exchange, you only give them maybe like the M4A1 Mod 2. Yeah, the M4A1 Mod 2 over the URG, and maybe AT4s instead of the RAWs. Or heck, even remove the grenade launchers as an option. And if you're going to do that, another thing that you could consider doing, and something that I mentioned in a video back in November as a possibility, would be giving them a sniper rifle. Something akin to SSO, but I don't know. I probably wouldn't go for that. But I digress. The next thing would be to give the CQC Rangers a Moz with an HE round. Now, this is something that I kind of want to see, but I don't actually want to see on the Rangers. And let me explain why. One of the benefits of having the Moz with the HE round is the extra range. It fires out to 600 meters, which is pretty much double the engagement range of everything in here. So it would be useful. But one of the biggest benefits of using a disposable launcher like the Law is that it fires a whole lot faster. The Moz needs to be reloaded after every shot. The Law can just be tossed on the ground once it's empty. So what I think would be better is to keep the Law, the A10 Law and Ranger CQC, and then add an option in like Ranger Moz to either go for a full anti-armor loadout, or go half and half between anti-armor and HE. And if I'm going to be honest, I think I would do that with the Ranger Moz team. But again, that's just me, and that wasn't technically within the PTE. That's just an observation I would like to make. The next thing on the list, and this one's going to require a bit of explaining. The next one on the list is giving the Marines, and specifically the M27 IAR, a 600 meter range. Now, let me explain why I want to see the range increased, but 600 meters might be a little bit of a pipe dream. In the PTE, the ranges for pretty much all the rifles were increased by about 100 meters. So if it could shoot out to 400 meters in live, it could shoot. So if it shot out to 400 meters in live, it shot out to 500 meters on the PTE. The M27 shot out to 600 meters. So by that logic, the M27 range increase, if you were to give them a comparable range increase on live that they had on the PTE, they would only shoot out to 500 meters. Now, let me explain why I think they should. The M27 IAR was, if I'm not mistaken, initially intended to replace things like the M249 and designated marksman rifles. The idea is that instead of accuracy by volume, you achieve accuracy by accuracy. And as a result, it was supposed to be a longer ranged firearm. At least to my understanding. So the ability to shoot out to 500 meters would be very useful, and it would reflect the M20 it would reflect the fact that the M27 was supposed to basically be a precision firearm, or at least a longer ranged firearm than your typical M4 or M16A4. Ultimately, while the Marine Corps intended it to replace things like the M249 or DMRs, it was just accepted across the entire branch. Now, as for balance, I can see that being a little bit unbalanced, but if I'm going to be entirely honest, I can see it being unbalanced, but part of me thinks that Marines just need something. Yes, I know they're a giant 13-man squad with 8 armor, so they are pretty durable, but they're also 95 points. They are by far the most expensive of the line infantry units. The only thing that comes close is 80-point line infantry units like Rangers or Desantki. In fact, so you've got Desantki at 80, you've got Guardsmen Strelki at 80, you've got Naval Infantry at 75, Marines at 95. There we go. That's what I wanted. Airborne at 85. Okay, so Airborne comes close, but it's still 10 points cheaper. Troopers and Troopers AA are also come close. They're only 5 points cheaper, but I'd also like to point out that they kind of sort of drift into weapon squad territory because they have either an ATGM or a man-pads. And infantry with anti-armor or anti-air weapons are going to be more expensive. Like, the weapon squad is 125 points. Stinger team is 90 points. You've got things like the VDV Cornet, which is 120 points, fully kitted out, if I'm not mistaken. These guys can be 90 points as well, fully kitted out, and this is only a 4-man squad. So if a 4-man squad with 6 armor is 90 points because they carry a pair of man-pads, then a 13-man squad with 8 armor being only 5 points more expensive just goes to show you that there is a price premium being applied because they have heavy weapons, for lack of a better term. So I think they could use something. Maybe a price reduction down to only 90 points. But personally, I would just like to see the range on the M27 increase just slightly. So, but anyway. Also, I don't know why they don't get it, but I'd like to see the SRA team get the M27 as well. For some reason, they're the only Marine unit that gets or that still keeps the M27, or not the M27, the M16A4 when you upgrade their weapons. I mean, Scout Snipers don't have it, but that's because Scout Snipers are a sniper team. So I wouldn't expect them to have a assault rifle. The next thing on the list is, and I'm going off secondhand information here, because I don't think I've ever used cruise missiles on the PTE myself. But apparently on the PTE, when a plane was firing cruise missiles, it would fly in a circle, rather than towards or in the direction of the cruise missiles are firing. And I would kind of like to see that come back, mainly because, well, it's the same basic logic I was giving for the increased speed for long-range air-to-air missiles. The plane doesn't need to fly in the direction of the target and thus fly towards enemy air defenses. It can, instead, it can basically circle, so it's has less risk of being shot down. Granted, that might make them a little bit too strong, but anyway, this entire video is just idea spitballing. So, like I said, I'm not expecting any of these to be in the next patch. The last thing on the list is, and this is going to sound a little bit weird, but to limit the high altitude range for SHORAD systems. Now, let me explain. If you remember, one of the biggest gripes I had in the PTE was that they reduced the range for air defense systems. And I didn't like that. That was probably the thing I complained about the most. Although the change that I didn't like the most was reducing the number of ATGM teams. But the reason why I bring up reducing the range, the high altitude range for SHORAD systems, is because one of the reasons why they reduced anti-aircraft missile ranges in general was to allow aircraft, and in particular fighter aircraft, more room to play. And for some systems, like for example the Tunguska, and well, I say the Tunguska, I'm specifically talking about the Pantsir, your high altitude missile range can get a little bit nuts. Because considering that radar doubles the high altitude altitude weapon range, that's a 3.6 kilometer missile range at high altitude. That's the same as a PAC-2 with its radar off. So, yeah. I think we're all in agreement that that's just a little bit nuts. And heck, even just with the Tunguska M, that's still a 3 kilometer range. With the M1, that goes out to 3.1 kilometers. Where is... There's the OSA. The OSAs, that's looking at 3.1 kilometers. That's looking at 3.3 kilometers. Where's the TOR? That is 3.3 kilometers. That's 3.4 kilometers. Where is... The SlamRam is looking at 3.3 kilometers. The MML Stinger is looking at... I mean, that's looking at 3 kilometers as is. And the MML Stinger is looking at 3.1 kilometers. This is looking at also at 3.1 kilometers. And I believe NASAMS is the same as like the MML. Or not the ML, the SlamRam. Yeah, NASAMS is pretty much the same as... Okay. So, when you consider that the range is doubled, it kind of... It doesn't defeat the point of limiting the of limiting AA ranges. But when you consider that, um, shorad systems are going to be closer to the line of contact, it's more likely that a shorad system is going to be able to engage a high-flying fighter aircraft in this patch than it would be in a previous patch, since they've reduced the range for the long-range anti-aircraft systems. Now, I will fully concede that if a shorad system that's maybe 1.5 kilometers behind the line of contact is engaging a fighter aircraft before a HIMAT system that might be 4 kilometers behind the line of contact, then the person controlling the HIMAT system probably doesn't know what they're doing, because if they're both activating radar, the HIMAT system is still going to have a significantly longer range. But one thing that you might do otherwise for shorad systems is to reduce the radar multiplier from, instead of 2 at high altitude, to only 1.25. So for slam rams, that's going to come down to apply a bit of rounding to it, maybe 2,100 meters at high altitude. For the AMRAMs, for the AIM-9s, it's maybe 2,000 at high altitude. For the Stingers, that's going to be 1870. That's going to be 1,875. For, let me think, that's going to be like 2,100. That is going to be 1875. Actually, no, that's not going to be 2,100. That's going to be closer to 2,000. That is going to be... That's going to be 2,250. This would be... That would be about 2,200 or about 2,100. That would be about... Actually, no, that'd be about 1,950 meters to 2,000. And on the Tor, again, about 950 to 2,000 meters with the radar on at high altitude, which is shorter than what they're making at low altitude, but it's still an improvement, but it's a significantly shorter improvement than what they would be making than what they would be making with a 2 times radar multiplier. Anyway, that's just my idea spitballing for the next patch. So, like I said, I don't expect any of these changes to actually make it into the game, and honestly, I'd be kind of surprised if half of them make it into the game. But I figured that I could at least make this video to explain the things that I like and that I want to see, and that's pretty much it, really. Anyway, I'm thinking about making a video for, I don't know, Broken Arrow content is probably going to be a little bit sparse for the next couple of weeks, at least until the patch drops. And I'm thinking about doing the zombie scenario, but with a different deck. Maybe something involving Striker Cav. I don't know. I'll have to give it some thought. Anyway, that's pretty much it for this video.